Real Estate, your Champions Real Estate team here at Berkshire Hathaway, Home Services Ambassador Real Estate Company. My name is Mark Wehner, the second team leader of Champions Real Estate team. Joining me today is Russ Williams. So we jump on here. Usually it's every Wednesday, but today it's Thursday, obviously. So my kiddos are on spring break, so we went down to Lincoln, down to Moral Hall, and got them running around the university down there and showed them Dad's old stomping grounds around the campus there. So, but yeah, didn't get a chance to jump on yesterday to give you kind of rundown over the 7 days. So we're jumping on today and rocking and rolling with it. So quick tip today, as obviously the weather's getting nicer, just the things to think about going around your house. One thing I did went on a listing appointment this week and just downspouts. Over the winter they get knocked off and blown off. Obviously it's really windy today. Make sure those downspouts are getting that water away from your foundation. Now is a good spring project of doing backfilling. That's basically putting dirt around the foundation. Was a 1 inch per foot, kind of a slope away from your house is usually what they recommend. I'm not a foundation expert by any means, but been in enough houses and stuff, and a lot of just those preventative maintenance items, just backfilling around your foundation and your downspouts can kind of help alleviate a lot of potential water issues in your basement foundation, those type of things, to get that stuff out and away from that foundation. So, when you're thinking of selling your house, just that preventive maintenance when those buyers are walking around like, hey, these guys have taken care of the house. Every spring you're kind of out there looking at those things, cleaning out your gutters. Those are things obviously with obviously leaves obviously in the fall. But if you didn't do that in the fall and you wait till the spring to do it, obviously that fun job of doing that. But be careful on those ladders. If you're not the most limber and nimble out there on a ladder, hire somebody to do it. Relieve that's worse that a couple, $100 or $200, whatever it costs to get it done, that you're not breaking a leg or anything like that. So, but anyways, let's jump on, see what's going on in the real estate market the last 7 days. So the numbers I ran today will be reflective of obviously Thursday numbers and stuff. So basically our numbers a little bit higher, because Thursday and Friday are typically days that agents will go live with listings. So it's all relative in regards. So 710 new listings in the last 7 days. So last week, on the previous Wednesday was about 592s or about 600, which, Russ and I were talking before we got on, and we're seeing a lot of activity in the marketplace, new listings coming on. We're getting in the springtime, obviously we're kind of those fluctuations of 80 degrees one day and snow yesterday, and so you don't really know when to timing the market to put your house on. Like I said, this week, it's spring break for my kiddos. I'm sure other kiddos around the Omaha metro area going to be having spring break either this week or next week, and those things, getting the houses ready. So yeah, we're seeing pretty good activity as far as the new inventory coming on. New contracts obviously is up, relative to that, number of the buyers coming in the marketplace. Russ will talk here in a second about what rates are doing from the geopolitical stuff, what we're seeing in that side of it. I haven't necessarily seen too much of a slowdown, from buyer activity on what the rates are doing, because I think people have kind of gotten that this is kind of the norm, then between that, 6 to 6.5, is kind of where we're kind of bumping around in that range there. The prices, in the last couple listings I've had, we've had multiple offers in that 300 price point. So, you got to be competitive in the marketplace, and contingencies and those type of things. And so you're starting to see some of that stuff coming on where, 3 months ago, 4 months ago, sellers were offering concessions, and stuff like that. So market changes. And I know we talked about that. You can't go back in the past, but those are some things that we talked about, things coming down the pipeline if you're ready to rock and roll a couple months ago to get the ball game there. So we had 455 happy new homeowners this last week. So congratulations to them. Let's jump in, look at the 30,000 foot view here of the numbers that we go over. So as we see here, we had 3306 on the new active listings in the Omaha and Lincoln area. 1788 is what we had 2 weeks ago. So we saw our number bump up. Last week was at 1756, and the previous week, funny enough, exact same, 1788. Our existing inventory and our new construction kind of flipped on this side here. So we had 917 existing listings active in the Douglas and Sarpy County area, so basically Omaha metro area, and then 871. So we're seeing some of those new construction houses, because what we're seeing too is when I was talking to our mastermind group, was it last week or the week before, is that some of those buyers that are out there looking in that 400 to 600 price point, there's still some decent spec homes out there that if they're not finding in that existing inventory, they're just saying, hey, if I'm going to pay this price, I might as well get a new construction. And I guess the trade-offs there, one is if you're buying new construction, you're probably going to pay a little bit higher taxes Property taxes, just because that mill levy is a little bit higher, your SID taxes are a little bit up, so that's all reflective. Or if you're buying an existing home that may be in the city limits, your property tax levy is going to be a little bit lower. So those are the goods and bads, and those are all things, like I said, that when we do a coaching session here, from a buying perspective of what are the pros of buying a new construction versus pros and cons, and not really cons. It's just more of know what you're getting into and know that what the benefits. We draw, line down the paper and across the top and your two columns, and you kind of go back and forth there. Our months of inventory, we're kind of treading back towards a seller's market. Obviously, we're seeing more buyers come in the market, and then obviously, the less inventory in that side. So our average sold price went up $2,000. Was 358 last week. It's at 360. That's basically from January. I kind of go basically the whole year. It's kind of how I do the number. But like when you look at March, what the last 11 days, when I look at that number, it's at 370. So it kind of just depends on which numbers you're looking at. So, I mean, like they always say, you can make statistics say what you want them to say, type of thing. But that's just kind of that 360, 370, kind of is where we're at, kind of sitting in our average sold price in that regard. So, yeah, like I said, the market's moving, all that good stuff. So, one thing I think that the uncertainty in the marketplace, the biggest uncertainty thing I think is our rates. And I know Russ is kind of all on, he's our numbers guy. He really pays attention to what's going on, nationally here and obviously globally and how that can affect our rates. And I think that's, like I said, it's just giving you guys that information on what we're seeing, and obviously like we don't have a crystal ball on what's going on, there's many different, like I said, I always talk the analogy, there's many different plays in our playbook that you can run from a lending standpoint, from a buying and a selling standpoint, a timing standpoint, all that stuff. So I think, I guess, Russ, I know we talked before we got jumped on, but I guess what are your general thoughts on what rates are, where they're at, where they're going, where they've been?
Yeah.
So I'll let
Yeah, it
you.
was just 2 weeks ago we were looking at the lowest rates in 4 years, and since 2 weeks ago on Friday, we've seen mortgage rates fairly steadily moving up. The big story here is that optimism that this situation in Iran is going to be over soon is fading, and that's causing inflationary concerns and fears in the bond market. Oil prices, for example, have climbed back above $94 a barrel, even after the International Energy Agency announced that 400 million barrels of oil were going to be released. We don't know when that will be released, and so we expect that will help when that happens, and that might have rates moderate, but we don't know that for sure. And of course, there are more attacks on ships in the Persian Gulf. Keep in mind, a significant percentage of the world's energy, oil energy, comes through that strait. So until the U.S. is escorting those ships and those shipping companies feel comfortable, we probably will be in a situation where energy is going to be more expensive, and that's an inflationary concern. And as we've talked many times, inflation is the arch enemy of mortgage rates. So are they horrible rates? No, they're up a little bit. It's still a good time to buy a house. As you mentioned, we've seen tremendous activity in the last week, especially, and I expect that'll continue as we move into the spring months. So, just this week, Mark, we've seen probably 5 or 6 multiple offer situations, and we've talked about normal loss of supply and demand, what that can do to not only home prices but also the contingencies you might like to get on your purchase. So, in the event that you've not put a plan together, you need to get in touch with Mark and his team. Certainly, if rates happen to stay elevated for a little while, we can always refinance when those rates come down, but you may have to pay more for that house if this activity continues.
Yeah, and I mean that's what we're kind of. I mean, we're seeing the same thing with multiple offers. I think we talk a lot about sports analogies. Here at Champions, is it's having being a coach mindset, coached hockey for I don't know 14, 15 years. But that's just one of those things that we look at is what plays you have the playbook, and like from a buyer's perspective, my goal has always been to get my buyer, my client, a seat at the table with that seller. Because if you got 5 offers, 10 offers on the table, we want to be able to get a call back from that from that listing agent saying, hey, would your buyer be open to X? And then we can come back to you as the buyer and say, hey, here's the play that we ran. This is what we got. They're asking, you asked for a home inspection. The other one that you're competing against doesn't have a home inspection. They like our offer better, but the home inspection, aspect of it, maybe, they're kind of not favorable terms from a seller's perspective. What would you like to do? And then you as a buyer now have an opportunity to weigh your options and say, is it worth it? Is it not worth it? My advice always to do that so you know what you're getting, depending on age of the house and all that kind of fun stuff. But I'm never going to tell a client not to do one, but it's one of those things you have that opportunity rather than, typically you don't even get a call back. you get a nice text message from the agent that says, "Hey, sorry you missed out on it. We went with a different offer." And then you're scrambling as a buyer, going, "What could I have done differently? Could I offer more? Should I have offered more? Should I have done the home inspection? Should I not do the home inspection? Should I ask for closing costs? Should I do an appraisal gap? Should I, there's all these different plays, but at least you have an opportunity. Like I said, if we get a seat at the table with them, and then you do the best you can. And if it's like I said, all my clients, I'm like, sometimes missing out on a house, you know is a blessing in disguise too. And there's always that next one that comes on that's, always maybe a little bit better or things of that sort or a better situation. And so things always happen for a reason. Is like as cliche as that sounds, my going on 18 years, especially in the last couple of years, there are reasons why things happen. I see, just in general, but it's getting you as the buyer, our client, that peace of mind of, did I do enough? Well, if you get a call back and you have an opportunity to say yes or no, you've done enough to now you have a little bit more control. And I feel like in this situation is that, like, as a listing agent, in the few recent listings I had, you had agents calling me saying, "What can we do?" Well, and they're asking, me what they can do. Well, I can only tell them what my seller wants me to tell them, and on the last offer that we got accepted, I almost coached that other agent how to write the offer, or just gave them suggestions, and they used those suggestions and they got their client literally a seat at the table. My seller's like, "Hey, if they're willing to do this, let's rock and roll with it." And it's one of those where I could have said, "Oh, hey, just give us your highest and best offer," as most agents do, and then they come back and I'm like, "Gosh, I wish I would have written it this way, because then it would have been advantageous for my seller, because then it helps both parties out." And so sometimes it's you're coaching that other agent a little bit, and ultimately it's up to that other buyer what they choose to do. But hey, let's give them some extra plays in the playbook that I know that may be beneficial for my client, and then it's beneficial for everybody. They get the house they love. That seller gets the offer that they love, and it's a meeting of the minds. And, whether that's an inspection involved in that, or appraisal gaps to, comfort the seller, there's a lot of different that everybody kind of gets a win-win. I know everyone's like, how can everyone have a win-win? Well, there's ways to do it. And that just, again, it's, as an agent, and teaching CE classes and stuff, you got to play nice in the sandbox, trying to take advantage of that buyer's agent or that buyer to get your seller the best terms. Then all of a sudden they feel like they've been taken advantage of it. That does get, so then you can get butting heads, and stuff like that, where they feel, that the buyers and sellers feel that animosity a little bit, and it's towards each other, and they've never even met each other, and so it's up to us as agents to work and get the best terms for both clients, and everybody's happy. So I think those are those little caveats that I think that as agents, or as the general public, if you're picking an agent, ask those questions. What are the plays in your playbook? How are you getting us this? And if that agent doesn't have the answer, maybe interview another agent, and things like that. And like I said, we love the opportunity. We have the agents on our team that we coach. Every agent's a little bit different, obviously, but we all try to have the same principles and get the same playbook that we run, being on the same team. So anyways, long-winded answer, but awesome. Yeah. So hopefully next week we'll be back on Wednesday. All that good stuff. It's less craziness with spring break and stuff like that. But anyways, enjoy the weather. I think it's supposed to be nice today. It's supposed to be getting a little bit better on and off. And then we're also coming up in, what is it? 16 days. We got our Easter egg hunt on March 28th, 1 o'clock over at Walnut Grove Park, kind of across the street from Millard South on Q Street, about 150th. So, we aren't necessarily making that a huge public Facebook page, because the last couple of years we've had like almost 400 kids, 250 some kids out there. It's gotten crazy. So we're trying to get it, a little bit more manageable. We'll still have the same amount of eggs, but I know I've learned from putting that event page, public, it can get crazy. So we're trying to keep it, to those that watch our episodes here. Obviously that gets out to the public, and we would love to have you there. But just trying to broadcast it to anybody and everybody on Facebook. But if you're watching our videos, maybe we haven't had a chance to do business together, but we'd love to meet you, and that's, I put a name to the face and stuff like that on the comments and things like that. So March 28th, we sent out save the dates to our clients and friends and stuff like that that are in our database. So if you want to get on that database, reach out to us. You can shoot me a text down here, 672-7670, or reach out through our website at championsrealestateteam.com. We can get you on that mailer. I do quarterly market analysis, and my goal, like I said, keep my clients informed so that they have those plays in the playbook and they got the scouting report. So sweet. Awesome. I will stop talking because I'll get yapping for a while. So anyways, take care, and I will see everybody later.